Are you one of the many busy professionals working in offices day in and day out? Do you wonder how some people grow their wealth fast, retire early, and play on workdays? Well, you're in luck, because Ginny Bolling hosts this show, Pivot to Prosperity, where she interviews people that can do just that. Play on workdays. Many guests have become financially free. She also interviews people that are on their journey and people that are in support roles, like attorneys, contractors, brokers, and others. Commercial real estate is the common element. She is on a mission to be sure busy professionals know they can own substantial commercial properties too, like apartments, self-storage facilities, and others, and not have to do the work managing them. Passive investing is the key. Syndications are the typical method. Tax write-offs are some of the biggest rewards. Ginny and partners find the deals, build a strong team and business plan, then offer the investment opportunities to passive investors. New episodes are released every Tuesday at 12, so watch for new releases. If you want to get involved, let us know. You need to get pre-qualified to hear about most deals. See the show notes for contact information.
Hello. Ginny Bolling here with Pivot to Prosperity, brought to you by Pivotal Real Estate Investments. And today we have Joshua Harris as our guest. And
hello, how are you doing?
thank you so much for coming on. I'm thrilled to say you're back in Orlando. And it was funny because I was at an appraisal institute event and you were the first speaker. I was
Right.
thrilled. Yes, I was. So that was great. And I'll do a brief introduction and then you take it from there. So I know you from University of Florida, or University of Central Florida, silly me. And Raymond McGuire, Victoria Butcher, and I came and we talked to your graduate class about eminent domain.
Right.
And yeah, that was fun. And then it seemed like it wasn't long after you moved away, but I am going to let you get into that. You are an expert witness when it comes to eminent domain cases, and I know that you've been a consultant to many, and that you are also a consultant in the development side and in with other real estate projects. Is it fair to say around the country or Florida, or where do
I've
you?
been currently doing a lot of things in Florida. I did spend almost 4 years as head of strategy for Skanska USA's commercial development business in the US. I was based in New York, and we were active in DC, Boston, Houston, Seattle, and Los Angeles. And Skanska is kind of one of the, I guess you call a mega developer company. Actually, we were headquartered, kind of a very interesting experience.
Right. You left the area for that job, right?
Actually, Rich, I left for New York University, and then I left New
Oh,
York
okay.
University to fill in the blanks.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you're the executive director of the Florida Real Estate Institute for Fordham as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, for Fordham. Yeah, so I'm director of the Fordham Real Estate Institute, which is based within Fordham University out of New York City. But I do reside in Orlando and just kind of go back and forth as I need to.
Very good. Well, so tell us more about you, though. What even got you into real estate, briefly?
It was interesting. I originally, when I was, I guess, careers, I was sort of proverbial good at math and science type kid. So engineering was something I looked at. I always had a bit of interest in construction and buildings, just I kind of found that more interesting. Space shuttles, but although that always sounded cool too. And I uh, originally was going to major in industrial engineering and kind of get into more, some of the more systems and process. I ended up getting an internship with Hubbard Construction Company. As I said, construction was an interest. And I candidly found the internship to be very boring. Hubbard, great company, it was great people, but I realized just from years of people I was working with that I didn't really want to be an engineer. So it was a decision. I'd always kind of interested in real estate and in sort of finance investments. And literally one day I'm just reading the course so printed then, and they said, "Wow, I looked at any real estate courses they did." That led me to a major called finance, where they were all sort of electives within the finance major. And I said, "Oh, this is interesting." Then looking at statics, dynamics, and fluid heat transfer, and all these other courses that would be part of an engineering curriculum. And I made a decision to switch over, and I wanted to try to get jobs and internships in real estate. Really, the rest is history.
Interesting. So you got into real estate, and then what was your first job then?
So I started
working with a small brokerage where I got to do some commercial as well as residential deals. And I was still a college student at the time. Um, I worked for kind of a small kind of private investor. I think I don't know if you would say call it family office or syndicator or some type of individual out of New York who was from this was pre before the world was getting kind of overheated. And then I decided to go back to get my MBA and then began working in the debt equity or ultimately going back to get my PhD and then sort of becoming, call it a real estate economist by trade or development expert for for the easiest way to describe it.
After having done all these different consulting types of positions and having kind of your pick probably on where you want to concentrate, tell us what you're doing now.
So, I made a decision I'd rather Orlando in Florida than as opposed to being up in New York, and especially with now the kind of flexibility to still do things in and out of New York while being here. Obviously, that became a lot more normalized in the post-pandemic world. That was one decision. I'm now actually joined up with one of my longtime friends and colleagues, John Crossman, with his firm Crossmark Services. We're actually working acquisitions of retail and some development as well of retail centers and sort of associated property, primarily in Central Florida.
So are you an advocate of mixed use with the residential upstairs kind of thing?
Short answer, yes. Obviously, mixed use development's always an easier said than done. We were obviously we're working on even consulting what would be mall redevelopments that would ultimately become back as a mixed use context where you would have kind of a retail town center with connected or apartment towers on top. So it's difficult and expensive to do mixed use, but I do think in a lot more markets where the density justifies it, absolutely has the value.
So what kind of density do you need to make it worthwhile?
It depends a lot on city by city, because obviously the minute you are going more vertical, construction costs and all the other complexities are going to go up substantially. So you need to be able to clear rents that are, going to need to be probably 20 to 50% probably, your garden or just more horizontal apartments are going to be. That works obviously, and like if you're close to any downtown, be it downtown Orlando or in a high density area, that can work. Now, if you get the land at a very cheap basis, it can potentially work. So, I mean, one advantage that retail has, and this is a big debate about, there's some of these very large shopping plazas that are very old that might be sitting on 20, 30, even 40 acres with large parking fields and a lot of just excess space. Some of those might make for great kind of redevelopment parcels that you probably could do that in. Really, you can do that in affordable or workforce. But the key, though, is you have to have a city or whoever your municipality is for zoning. They have to be able to grant density, because if you can't go ultra high end, you can always go higher density and then service obviously a much more affordable product, which there's tend to be infinite demand just about everywhere.
All right, so much has to do with your basis and then yeah, density and now the incentives, we were talking before recording about the live local legislation. And have you all looked at using that to max out the density and the jurisdiction?
I haven't worked on a direct live local. I mean, one project I'm working on, there's some discussion if live local would be useful for for getting some of the tax incentives that would be for some of the units that could qualify. It's still a pretty new law. I'm optimistic about it. I mean, I think it was. I mean, look, it's funny, but outside of Florida, and talk about housing and other things out. It's literally up in New York. In fact, this is where Fordham, we're doing a housing policy panel at the end of January, and I think we're gonna. I mean, one of the things I'm going to bring up is obviously solutions like live local as some part of sort of a nationwide strategy approach for getting more units entitled. But it's still pretty new, and I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. But I can't say I've completely figured it out. And you have to be. I think today, when you're opening salvos, you have to kind of have a lot of willingness to pay attorney's fees to probably if you're trying to fight something on it. But there are tax benefits in there that are pretty solid. So if you're project qualified, certainly if you're developing at all in delivering projects that are going to fit up to that, I believe it's 120% of area median income, for apartments. You should definitely look at if you can qualify and take advantage of it and get the tax benefits, right? I mean, that's what it's there for. If in addition to all the city local, the preemptions trying to fight off NIMBYs and things like that.
So yeah, there's a lot of talk about that 120% isn't truly affordable housing, even attainable. It's really market is what some people are saying. What's your thinking on that?
It's actually, I think, one of the benefits of Live Local is that it doesn't restrict down to some of these other programs that were as restrictive as 60% of area median income or 80%. It allows you up to 120%, but it really is fitting something that's sometimes called the missing middle. And if you actually look at where programs or sort of just the actual development, you have like the low income housing tax credit or LIHTC type program, right? And that's really focused more on that 60% below AMI type of threshold. Obviously, luxury kind of market apartments are what most developers are doing because there's been fairly abundant financing, and if you can get the rents to work, it works great. So, the proverbial firefighter, nurse, and teacher that are looking for an apartment who have incomes that are probably close to median income, they can't quite afford or don't want to afford a luxury apartment, but they make too much money to afford the affordable apartment. So that's sort of where I think Live Local is trying to serve, and that's I think that's actually there's a lot of market that are served in that category.
Right. And so when you're looking at the malls and the retail and whatnot, are you looking to incorporate residential really at all, or no?
For the most, yes. I mean, for the most part, the only way these projects are probably going to make sense is that you're going to add vertical density of apartments.
Of
you're right.
workforce or luxury or in between?
Depends on the market. I mean, I think you're definitely going to probably have some market rate type product. You might have some affordable components just depending on how the site plan goes. Again, I mean, one of the challenges construction costs in just general is that as I always joke, a 2x4 doesn't tend to care if it goes into a luxury apartment or goes into it costs the same. Construction labor also seems not to care. So the net effect of it is that if you can't sort of build to essentially the top end of the rent, if you can't build to the top of the rents, it's very hard to build. So that is just a challenge. That said, with Live Local and some of the other things, yeah, I do think that affordable components could absolutely come into play, especially if you have a large municipality that's with you enough density. So I mean, I hate to say it's the municipality is really much going to be key on the potential of any of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I committed one of my own cardinal sins. I threw in a reference to Live Local, and we got talking without actually saying what it is. And it's a law that was passed in Florida over a year ago now. It was last legislative session before this year. And it was intended to help encourage more affordable housing and give tools to cities and counties and local jurisdictions for tax incentives and all kinds of other things, just for the audience. And so that's what we're talking about. And so what it provides for, though, is that you can get the maximum density within a jurisdiction if you delegate 40% or more of your units, your apartment rentals, to this affordable housing. That's where we were talking about what's called affordable, and it's up to 120% of AMI, which is adjusted median income for that area. So yeah. So let's pivot a little bit. I would like to touch on what kinds of things you testify about and help the audience know the kinds of things that you can offer, because you're an expert in those areas as well.
Right. So I typically am called on as sort of a real estate economist or a real estate development expert. Occasionally I've had, this goes back to some of my sort of unique background, I've had real estate license law standards of practice type cases. They're slightly different, but in sort of the same, some of the same thing, coming in as sort of a professor expert in those areas. I could be building damage models. So if you had one party that lost their project due to the actions of the different actor. They need a damage model for how much they should be compensated. That obviously in the eminent domain case, I'm usually doing an economic analysis or development feasibility analysis that then becomes what's considered predicate material that the appraiser, who has to ultimately decide, or the appraisers that are battling over ultimately the compensation city, I'm supporting them by opining on the market forces or the impact. So, which obviously, if depending on which side, either wants, hopefully to get highest or lowest value. So generally, there are always disputes about real estate from either landlord tenant or investor lender, owner lender, developer and purchaser. Something that arises where either the value or the market action or function or the standard of practice that gave rise to that dispute. I'm sometimes called on as an expert to help the parties as well as the courts, and if there's even a jury, to making the right decision.
Right. And so often that gets into feasibility studies and things like that, and cost benefit analyses. And so
all types of things. Yeah.
I was just at a presentation by Kimberly Horn on EV stations and where that technology is. Have you done any kind of feasibility studies on EV stations?
When I was with Skanska, we did a lot of analyses on electric vehicle, a lot of autonomous car and parking solutions. Skanska has a strong mandate towards becoming a net zero developer and being able to build, and not just in the sense of like buying offsets, but truly building properties that can kind of generate electricity or utilize very low rounds of electricity such that they virtually don't draw much. And obviously integration of electric vehicles into the parking systems is kind of a feature thing that is becoming much more common both in new development. It is pretty interesting. I will say there's one of the misunderstandings about EV charging is that people, owners of like a retail center, typically don't really want EV charging because they don't want people to stay longer than they absolutely have to, right? Parking is sort of a minimum, a lifeblood of a center, as I've heard it said, right? So if people stay an extra 15 minutes just so their car can charge, it could distract from another shopper coming in, right? Apartment complexes, office buildings, things where people are, when people are going to work or going home and they're going to stay there, keep their car parked for a number of hours. That's a place where obviously you need to have probably expansive and ever more capacity for electric vehicles. And, certainly over time, I think solutions that can help adapt and install these things into existing buildings is going to be a huge opportunity. And it's easy to do in a new building, but it's, there's lots and lots of buildings that people are going to own electric cars and go to work or go home to.
Right, right. Well, and tell me, for Skanska, I always thought of them as commercial construction, more like institutional schools. I know more for schools because my husband used to do those. But
yeah. So
did you do residential communities with them too?
So the way Skanska is, obviously it's a kind of a global conglomerate. So in Florida, they're most known for their construction. They had both the civil construction operations as well as the building development operations, which is probably what you're familiar with. I worked on commercial development, which was we were the principal investor developer side of the business. So we had to hire Skanska as our own contractor, and we developed apartments, we developed office buildings, and then sort of retail mixed use that would come along with that. And they also did infrastructure development. So if you are listening in sort of in the Florida market, one of the larger infrastructure developments, not just a construction project, was a thing called the Ultimate I-4. So they are, I believe they haven't sold it yet. They still are the remaining owners or a 50% owner of the toll lanes along I-4.
Ooh, I didn't know that. Wow.
They also like the LaGuardia Terminal B. If you fly into New York and LaGuardia Terminal B, I think they've divested, but they were the lead P3 owner, investor, and then also separately a contractor.
Oh man, you've said so many things. We're going to have to do more of these talks too. So, all right, let me go back a second and unpack some of this.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned cars being parked too long at a retail place, and I would think that you'd want some cars anyway, not all, not filled a lot, but you want to look like people are coming and whatnot. Yet, when you look at what Vision 2050 is all about in Orange County, how they're revising their land use and zoning codes, my understanding is they're trying to put the parking in the rear so you don't even see the parking lots. Put the buildings up front.
Right.
And granted, that can't happen overnight or even in decades, but what do you think of that?
It depends on the road. I will say that if you impose that restriction, you're gonna on certain areas, on certain streets. Listen, I've seen municipalities even before I try this. You could fail the project just because people aren't gonna, if you can't see where the parking is or it's hard to get in and out, people drive right by. So you have to be very careful that you still fit market demand. And God bless government planners, but sometimes the practicality there's you don't want to, sometimes we call planning light, where you literally put a restriction in and then nothing can follow, and then you don't get any of the benefits. So I would I'd be careful about hardcore restrictions. Traditional, putting parking behind kind of goes into that traditional neighborhood or traditional streetscape concept. Can be very beautiful. It can work great in certain areas. So I certainly think if it's part of a broader planning context, it can work wonderfully, but it can also be challenging. So it's just kind of making sure that you um, you know obey the market forces as they go.
Well said, well said. And then as far as P3s, have you gotten involved in many the P3s out there?
I've done some consulting on a few of them. Also, I've worked on the side when I was with University of Central Florida on the one that's now ultimately, I was on the selection committee, ultimately got the project started, that is now the Celeste Hotel, which is the on-campus hotel at UCF
Oh,
for
okay.
the interest. So I've obviously we did, Skanska did quite a few of those. I didn't work directly with the construction development team, which is now they call it asset management because they're not starting new ones. But so I've been involved tangentially at best. It's very interesting. I do think that the P3, it's like all great things. It's big and complex, so it's easier said than done. But it from a need perspective, when we think about the amount of infrastructure and sort of development or that's needed, we're probably going to need to get better at P3s across the country if we're really going to solve kind of the challenges that we have in our.
Takes a special kind of team or leaders. The leaders are key.
Mhm.
They set the tone so
Yeah,
much, I think,
very
early.
much.
Yeah. All right. Well, and I want to ask you the big question I ask all of my guests as we near the end here. And is there a pivotal person or event that brought you either to where you are now or that's pushing you forward to a certain goal?
I always, and I purposely held this for the end of this. For me, the 2008 global financial crisis or downturn, I think, was one of the most pivotal things in my career in terms of both
Ding,
forcing
ding, ding. You
direction.
get extra points
Yeah.
for saying pivotal.
Yep, there you go. So I get the context here. So, but because I was kind of in a debt equity placement shop and kind of saw the handwriting on the wall that we were going to kind of fall apart. And it was one of those things where I don't want to say like I completely predicted at kind of a much younger age that a downturn was going to happen at the pace that it did. But I kind of said, well, we're not going to have to close deals because these were mostly development type deals. These really weren't working out, and the banks were saying no. And I figured, well, if we can't close deals, then I'm not going to make big bonuses or anything. And I realized this firm doesn't have a lot of money, so I don't think they're going to pay my salary even, right? And I had the opportunity to enter the PhD program, at the University of Florida in finance. And it was, walking away from, it was not a bad job to make 25 grand a year as a research assistant. And so I'm starting in this it's August of 2008. September it happens a month later, and that's with Lehman Brothers, everybody wipes out. And suddenly I feel a heck of a lot smarter. And if it wasn't for that kind of impending doom or sense that this wasn't going to work out, I probably would have made what was, at least from a career decision, probably the biggest decision in terms of sort of crafting the direction I went. So that's kind of, I always like to tell that story apart because there always can be crazy calamitous times. There will be another big black swan event or a recession, whether that's this year, next year, 10 years, I couldn't tell you, but has the nature of why they're unpredictable. But I will just promise you it's going to happen most likely in your lifetime if you live for any significant period forward. So don't be afraid, deal with them as they come, and maybe you'll get the end of the day as a result.
And it sure provides opportunity too. I mean, that is where
Certainly.
generational wealth gets created for many as well. When you get it, like like Buffett says, it's when there's blood in the streets, that's the time to buy. And
It's also when it's hardest to buy. There's a
it also
reason
what?
why. It's also when it's the hardest to buy.
The hardest, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because people don't want to invest unless they have the vision and yes, so true. But well, great. Okay. And so do you have anything in particular I didn't ask about that you'd like to share, or something you're working on, or anything in particular?
I'd say the easiest things, if you want to find me, come find me on LinkedIn. You can just look for Joshua A. Harris. It's if you do the LinkedIn thing, it's J Harris PhD is kind of handle. We do a lot of we do a lot of events both virtually and in person at Fordham universities for the Real Estate Institute. So and if you are interested in learning more about real estate, we have all of our in person in New York, but also fully online. So you can live in Florida or Texas or anywhere else. If you want to get a Master's of Science in Real Estate or in Development, Construction Management, and now most recently Hospitality, come check us out.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. That's great. And like I say, I think I'm going to need to have you come on more often and talk about things, especially now that you're plugged in here. Yep. And I am now designating you one of the area's pivotal people. So what that means, because you influence a lot of lives, what you have since you've been a professor here before, and you've been working with some of these big companies, and you're still, in that professor mode and whatnot. So that means that this will be a specially marketed podcast, and I'm going to have a lapel pin that I send you that says you're a pivotal person.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, thank you again. And all that contact information will be in the show notes.